Hello YouTube, how's it going? This is the crossover. This is the fourth installment in my series where we're going to be breaking down every team's offseason, and today's video is going to be about the Oklahoma City Thunder. Taking a look at the season that the Thunder just had, I landed on a grade of an A. This was really the first, year of a rebuild for them, as they traded CP and Schroeder, as we all know, and let Gallo walk in free agency. To start off, I think their coach Mark Daigneault did a great job this year. Excuse me if I'm mispronouncing his name, but I think he did an awesome job this year. Obviously, we didn't get it to see him really showcase his X's and O's, due to the lack of, real talent on the roster, but a young coach. And I think the most important thing with the rebuilding team is to establish confidence in your young players. And I think he did a hell of a good job with that. You take a look at guys like Théo Maledon, who came over from France. Didn't put up the eye-popping stats in France. Obviously, he was a later pick in the draft, as well as a guy like Poku, who just came over from Olympiacos and came from playing kids. I mean, Poku's barely 200 pounds, soaking wet, as we all know. And obviously those players had their struggles on the court, but it never seemed like it got to them mentally. And, credit to them for staying strong, but I'd have to imagine that Mark did a great job of instilling that confidence in them, right? And, as the Thunder were blatantly tanking, they always had a rotating door of players, right? Like Kendrick Williams, Moses Brown, like a Jalen Horde, while I pull up Justin Jackson, so on and so forth. Everybody always seemed like they were playing hard. They were always giving it their all. And I credit him for that, and I'm excited to see what he could do next year. Moving on to a player like Shai. I'm not sure what more you can ask for Shai of a player. I think last year he definitely established himself as an all-star potential guard with an all-NBA caliber ceiling. And I mean, he's living up to that projection. I mean, there's not much more that you could have asked for Shai. I mean, just an amazing talent. Just to give you a quick breakdown of his stats: 23.7 points, 4.7 rebounds, 5.9 assists, 41% from three on five attempts essentially. Shot much better from the 2-point range. Shot much better from mid-range, as well as being arguably the best scoring guard in the paint. The way he's able to slither around pick and rolls, attack different seams, different openings, gaps in defenses. With his change of speeds, with his floaters, with his craftiness, the way he's able to turn and score at different angles. I mean, he's arguably, in my opinion, the best scoring guard in the paint. Being a solid rebounder, getting better at finding his teammates, getting better at shooting on and off the ball, just growing into his own as an all-NBA caliber guard, a blue-chip talent in this league, a cornerstone, really, just an awesome cornerstone, for this Thunder team to have, moving forward. And again, credit to Mark for instilling that confidence in him, allowing him to believe in himself that he is that level of player. And I'm sure, of course, Shai put in the work just like Théo and Poku, but credit to Mark again for really letting Shai take over the offense the way he has, as well as being, I don't think he's the greatest defender in the world, but he's average to above average on that side of the floor, and I can expect him to continue to develop on that side of the floor, as the Thunder get more and more competitive. Just to quickly mention the rumors that Shai is going to be packaged with the 6th pick in the draft for the number 1 overall pick. I think that's laughable. As much as I love Cade Cunningham, and if you want to hear my opinion on him, please go check out my Pistons video. But the idea of trading Shai for Cade, as much as I love Cade, and as much as I think he's going to be, in my opinion, he projects to be a better player than Shai. But, nothing is for certain. At the end of the day, these are prospects. Anything can happen, and you would be hoping that Cade would be, even though he projects to be better than Shai, you'd be hoping that Cade is better than Shai is right now. So I mean, that makes no sense to take that risk. The Thunder have a cornerstone, continue to build around him. I think that's the way they should go. But taking a look at the other players that were on the Thunder this year, you had a player like Lou Dort, who I think again had a lot of confidence instilled in him. He had a lot of reins to operate as that ball handler, which I don't think he's suited for. I mean, he's really a role player. I think a lot of Thunder Twitter overrated him a little bit. I understand he had a couple great scoring outings, but still, was not efficient from three. From three, not really efficient, but was definitely an improvement from last year, as well as shooting on the ball, which is nice to see from your lead 3-and-D role player, which is what he is. But outside of the 3-point mark, outside of from shooting beyond the arc, he really wasn't. He was very inefficient. Still about a free throw shooter in the 70s. So I think Lu Dort's production was a bit overrated. But I mean, he's a solid 3-and-D role player to have moving forward. And then you take a look at what they got out of guys like Al Horford, right? The production. We all thought Al Horford was dead after his stunt in Philly. And he managed to come back, have a hell of a year with the Thunder this year, was productive on defense, looked like the Al Horford in Boston, and really had awesome synergy with Shea, which a point which I will get into later. Poku had his moments, was just incredibly inefficient, but still Poku is Poku. We all love Poku. Really, I thought last year I valued him top 10 in my board. Any team that was drafting him should have expected him to struggle for at least 2, 3, 4 years into his career before he really starts to take off, which I'm glad that he ended up in a situation like Oklahoma where he can continue to build and go through his woes. I thought Ty Jerome had a great season, crafty offensive player, great shooter. He's not much on the defensive end, but he has size, so he's not that much of a liability. Crafty, nice floaters. So overall, I think the Thunder had a very, very good season, right? They went out there, they accomplished their goal of tanking, right? They didn't end up with that 2 top 5 picks like they wanted, but still, ending up with the 6th pick. They have an established franchise cornerstone in Shea. They got valuable role players moving forward like a Lu Dort, Ty Jerome, Teo Maledon can certainly continue to develop. Taking a look at some offseason goals I have for the Oklahoma City Thunder. First off, I have them continuing to add talent to their roster through the draft. This is really big, considering the multitude of picks that they have, and just taking a look at their roster. Right, they have role players like Dort, Jerome, Poku, Maledon. Outside of that, it's pretty barren. I mean, I'm really not a big Darius Bazley fan, just given how inefficient he is. He's probably a low end. He's probably the 8th, 9th man on the bench. Kendrick Williams, as much as I liked him, guys, these are a lot of G League level. The Thunder overall had a lot of G League level players on their team next year. So adding true NBA caliber prospects to their team for this upcoming season to test out, especially with the multitude of picks that they have moving forward, I think is their primary goal for the offseason. And who they should select with those picks, we will get into later. Secondly, I have them trying to seek a deal for Kemba Walker. Right, I doubt you're gonna get much for him now, so it might be better to hold on to him. Let him play early in the beginning of the year, and see if he can put up better stats than he did for Boston. Health is a big thing. If he can't stay healthy, I don't think it really matters. So while the Kemba Walker talk is kind of died down with his health and his lack of production, I could definitely see a team like LA, both LA teams getting desperate. Both of them are kind of in need for a point guard, right, with the Lakers with their Dennis Schroeder situation, as well as the Clippers kind of having a rotating door, and you're assuming Reggie Jackson will get more money than the Clippers will be able to pay him. So I could definitely see them trading for Kemba Walker, maybe 2 role players, a decently high salary role player, and maybe a late pick. I assume that could get the deal done. Kemba Walker, I'm not sure how much. Right, the high outcome of Kemba Walker during the season is that he puts up 20 to 22, 23 points per game, and stays relatively healthy. Even then, it's he's still an aging point guard with the injury history. It's how much are you really going to get for him? So it might be better. The difference in packages might not be that much, so you might just go ahead and look to seek a trade now in the offseason, right? I could also see a team like Miami being interested, depending on what happens with their point guard situation. Maybe a Philly if all falls apart over there. So just test the waters with the Kemba Walker trade. Next up, continue to do what they've been doing, right? Just add large contract players, add picks to those contracts, receive that, right? Just send whatever team, just one of the players in their rotating door of prospects, right? Because another big thing is that they just have so many picks, so you're not going to be able to keep all these guys, right? So maybe moving one or two for a high contract player, right? A lower end on your a lower end prospect in which the Thunder wouldn't really mind trading. I think they can move a couple of those guys, one or two, continue to add large contract players, continue their factory of turning these players that everyone thinks are washed up into, real productive players, as well as continue to add picks. Really looking at the market of these players, one that comes to mind is a Kevin Love. I can definitely see, Kevin Love and maybe adding. Cleveland doesn't have the best picks. Well, obviously their own picks, but taking a look at the other picks that they have, I doubt they'd be wanting to give up one of their picks. Maybe like a distant protected pick, maybe like a protected top 10 pick. Kevin Love, but Kevin Love doesn't have as 2-3 years left on, so it's pretty. Kevin Love's situation is probably not a good one, but looking at other big contract players out there to acquire for picks. Number 4, finally, I have them, find another stretch big. I think, Al Horford's synergy with Shea really emphasized this point for me. I think to get the best version of Shea, I think he definitely needs to be paired with a big that can space the floor. Obviously, he's going to be an all-NBA talent in his own right, but, if you really want to make his life truly easier and unlock all that Shea can give you, I think getting a stretch big is really key for that. There's not really many in the draft, but, you could potentially trade for one. And definitely in this year's free agency, there's a couple of them on the market, which we will definitely get into later. Taking a look at the salary cap quickly for the Thunder, we see Kemba Walker being paid $36 million, which actually ranks 11th in the league for the highest salary. It's pretty insane looking back at 2019 and the mistake that Boston made, giving Kemba this level of contract. Again, as we previously stated, there might be some teams interested in trading for him. You're right. I mentioned the LA teams, potentially Philly or Miami, depending on what happens. But yeah, it's going to be tough finding suitors for Kemba Walker. Moving on to the rest of the roster, I mean, obviously look at the difference between Shea and Kemba's pay grade. Shea is definitely the better player than Kemba now. Shea getting paid $5 million is a crime. Obviously, that max extension is going to be kicking in whenever he inks the deal. This upcoming season is going to be his 4th, so he's eligible for that extension. So we'll see how that works out. Poku getting paid $3 million, being that intriguing prospect that they do have, is great value. Darius Bazley, I didn't mention him much in the season grade, but I think he's like a budget Giannis. That's really what Darius Bazley. I think he has solid defensive versatility. He offers really. I think he's a good screen setter. I think he could be a valuable role man, but outside of that, I mean, he posted the league's worst true shooting percentage within attempts to qualify. He was right up there with Dwayne Bacon and John Wall and Russell Westbrook. So, I mean, Darius Bazley is a role player, bench player moving forward. But at $2 million, not bad. I mean, he is young, so we can expect him to get better. Ty Jerome at $2.4 million. That's pretty good value for being a guy who can space the floor, crafty guard, as we previously mentioned, and Lou Dort. $1.7 million, being that valuable 3-and-D role player that he is great value. And the Thunder have a couple other contracts that I'm just going to brief over, and they're non-guaranteed, so I didn't include them. Kendrick Williams at $2 million. I don't think it's worth bringing him back at $2 million. I thought he was a hard-playing role player. I thought he had his moments, but I wouldn't bring him back. Thunder fans, you guys can let me know how you feel about that in the comments. As well as Isaiah Roby, I wouldn't bring him back either. I wasn't that big on Isaiah Roby this year. I think he was I didn't like him better than Darius Baisley, and I don't like Darius Baisley. So I see no reason to bring in Isaiah Roby, especially when the Thunder have as much draft capital as they do. I don't see any reason to bring back a player like Isaiah Roby. And the same thing with Gabriel Deck. I mean, it makes no sense to bring back these guys when the Thunder have as much draft capital as they do, where they can add real NBA level prospects. So again, looking at the salary cap, it's basically barren. The Thunder are gonna have a lot of money this offseason where they can soak up contracts or maybe take some risks in restricted free agency, which we will get to very soon. But outside of Kemba Walker, the Thunder's books are clean. Finally, we take a look at the draft picks for the Oklahoma City Thunder. First off, with the 6th pick, I think that Scotty Barnes is a lock. Pretty intriguing prospect at that 6'9", 6'10" frame. Start off on the defensive end, he's a beast. I think he's gonna be able to come in and guard big body 2s, 3s, and 4s. He's a great rebounder, menace in transition. As both a ball handler and running the floor. I think he's a great personality. If anybody's followed him, all the way back to his Montverde days, funny guy, great person. I think he's gonna add flair to any locker room he's in. I think he's gonna be definitely a presence. Definitely seems like a nice kid, fun guy. But looking at his skill set on the offensive end, I think I really have doubts, and I really don't like the pick for Scotty Barnes at 6 just because of how raw he is offensively. And taking a look at this Oklahoma City Thunder team, although everybody else is raw, I think Scotty Barnes is an exception to that rule of where the Thunder are just adding raw players, just letting them develop. Because Scotty Barnes, in order to achieve his maximum upside of being like a super Draymond, he needs to be surrounded by talented players, right? So I think it would have benefited Scotty Barnes to go, later in the first round, maybe even falling to, the Warriors at 7. Maybe they want to move on from Draymond, then they have their Draymond replacement in Scotty Barnes. You never know. But Scotty Barnes, I think he needs to be surrounded by, other offensively talented players in order to achieve, that upside of being able to take advantage of the playmaking skills that he does have. But just given how poor his I think his form needs work, I don't believe in his touch. Let's just put it this way: I'm not a fan of Jonathan Kuminga. I stated that in my Magic video. I doubt Jonathan. I have doubts about Jonathan Kuminga reaching that star upside that a lot of people have seem to believe that he is going to achieve. But I think Jonathan Kuminga has a better shot in the half court than Scotty Barnes. I think he has a better touch than Scotty Barnes, and I think he has a better jump shot. I think he has a deeper bag than Scotty Barnes, and I think Jonathan Kuminga is going to come in and struggle in the NBA offensively, at least for the first 2 years of his career. So what does that lead you to think about my opinion on Scotty Barnes offensively? I think he's going to struggle mightily offensively, especially when he's going to be surrounded. I mean, his synergy, the best player in the court is for the Thunder is going to be Shea. His synergy with Shea, I have questions about that. Right, I think to maximize Shea, he needs to be in a pick and roll with somebody who's going to be able to space the floor, since he's improved, as a catch, with his 3-point shot creation on and off the ball. But Scotty Barnes is a good. I think he's going to be I think he was a better role man in college than he's going to be in the NBA, just because of how much bigger everybody else is going to be. So, and I see the playmaking potential with Scotty Barnes, but again, he needs to be surrounded by talent that he can feed, and where the attention is going to be drawn away from him, right? The defense is going to be focused on other players where he can create for the rest of the team, right? In that Draymond Green role, and he's just not going to have that on the Thunder. So I definitely have questions about that. I just put James Bouknight here at 6, just because in my opinion he's going to be the better prospect. I think he's going to end up being the better player. Let me know, to my subscribers and viewers. Let me know if I should drop a big board down in the comments to give like my opinions on all of the prospects in the first round. I think I have James Bouknight higher on my board. I think he's the better prospect. I think he's going to be the better NBA player, just because of that shot creation. At that frame, at that 6'4", 6'5" frame, with that athleticism, as deep of a bag as he has, he would automatically come onto this Thunder team and give them more shot creation than besides Shea and maybe Kemba if he's on the roster or not on the roster, right? Is unlike Scotty Barnes, it's James Bouknight isn't going to be dependent on who else is on the roster. He's going to come in and do his thing and be the player that he is, regardless of who's on the roster. But Scotty Barnes is going to be the pick at 6. That's just my opinion on who should actually go at number 6. Taking a look at 16, Zaire Williams was a freshman, 6'9", 6'10", from Stanford. Had a horrible year. Was supposed to come in and be a Paul George-esque player. Was a 5-star recruit, top 10 prospect, the highest prospect in Stanford, highest ranked prospect in Stanford basketball history. But he had an awful year, right? He injured his well, I'm forgetting if it's his ankle or his foot. It was one of the two. But faced lower leg injuries for pretty much all of college. The team was traveling. He was away from home. There was a lot of factors going into Zaire Williams' poor production this season. But when he was on the court, it was awful. I think on both ends of the floor, really. I mean, you see when you watch him play, you can see the potential. But in terms of just the production, it was just not there, right? The efficiency was god awful from three. It was below 30% from the field. He wasn't a good wasn't a good shot maker on defense. He has a nice frame. He's pretty quick on his feet, but it was just not there. I mean, again, you can see the framework of him turning into a valuable NBA player, but in terms of just the production, it was just not there. Again, he could come into this Thunder team similar to like a player like Poku, just come in, develop, go through his woes. Another player that I have them monitoring at 16 is Franz Wagner. Came off of a pretty good year with Michigan. Obviously had left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths from the NCAA tournament. But again, 6'9", 6'10", I think his calling card in the NBA is going to be on the defensive end. I don't think he's the greatest defender, but I think his versatility really shined through in college. He was able to guard guards as well as big man. I think he took advantage of his size in college, similar to the way Obi Toppin looked a lot bigger in college than he did in the NBA. I think Scotty Barnes, as previously mentioned, is going to have a case like that in the NBA where he's going to be like, oh my God, like he's not just going to be able to use his overwhelming height. And Franz Wagner is a similar way. Like Franz Wagner was just a lot of, if you watch Franz Wagner, a lot of his highlights are just a lot of his highlights on the defensive end are just him taking advantage of his size against like 6'1" guards. Like that's not going to happen in the NBA. But I think his versatility is valuable. I think he does have versatility, even though I don't think he's going to be the greatest defender. Being able to I think he's pretty quick on his feet. I think he's going to be able to guard not many 2s, but 3s and 4s. Offensively, I think his shooting is definitely overrated. He didn't really shoot all that well from percentage wise, and I think the form could use a little bit of work. Again, he had a couple good post moves. Again, I don't know how valuable that is if you want your 6'9" forward posting up. But if he can continue to work on that 3-point shot, I could see it being a valuable role player for whatever team drafts him. Moving on to the 18th pick, I think the Thunder definitely need to look at guards, and I have them addressing their guards at this 18th pick. First off with Sharife Cooper. Now, I'm much lower on Sharife Cooper, and I would be pretty hesitant with this pick here just because you look at the 6th pick, 6th pick being Scotty Barnes, a guy who's not going to be able to space the floor in the NBA. 16th, Zaire Williams and Franz Wagner both have shooting questions, and then Sharife Cooper with as we all know, a pretty horrible jump shot. If you haven't watched Sharife Cooper shoot a ball, I suggest you go watch it. He kind of leans his lower body in and then his upper body out, and it's very weird. He's not going to be able to get that off in the NBA. There was some hope that he might have changed it, but looking at the way he shot at the draft combine, that obviously wasn't the case. He's sticking with the same form. 6'1", anywhere from 5'10" to 6'1", as we all know. He's listed as 6'1", but we all know in sports that we add 2 or 3 inches to our height to make us look more appealing on paper. But Sharife Cooper is probably like a 5'10" in reality. So in the NBA, he's going to get demolished on the defensive end. He didn't give much effort on that end of the floor in college, so he's going to be awful defensively in the NBA. Outside of shooting on offense, though, I mean, he's a playmaking wizard. The way he's able to operate the pick and roll, manipulate defenders with his eyes, ball fakes, dribble with his handles. I think he has a good handle, not a great handle like a lot of people would believe. I think he can definitely clean it up a little bit. But just with that shot, again, as we talked about with Scotty Barnes and a little bit with Franz Wagner, as Franz Wagner was a little bit of a playmaking hub out of the post. But again, how valuable is that really going to be at the NBA level if you don't have a jump shot? And Sharife Cooper's jump shot was just not good, and the form, anywhere from the percentages to the form. So I have doubts about that pick, but again, he would be able to come in for the Oklahoma City Thunder and add something that they don't have with that exciting playmaking. And then I have them taking a look at Jared Butler. Between Jared Butler and Sharife Cooper, I would definitely take Jared Butler for this team, just because he would add, some age. Still would be a rookie, right? He's a junior, but definitely some age, some championship experience. Definitely much more of a role player than Sharife Cooper. But a more consistent role player. I think he would be a better version of Teo Maledon. I think he would come in. I think he's great on defense. Great perimeter defender. Both with his IQ, his hustle. I think he's gonna struggle with like those truly athletic point guards. It might take him a bit to get adjusted to the NBA. Athletic wise, on really both ends of the floor. But defense. Defense is, I think, his strongest part of his skill set. So it might take him a little bit to get adjusted to NBA level athleticism. But on the offensive end, I like Jared Butler as a floor spacer. I think he's a pretty good cutter. He's a smart player. What I like to compare him to is a right-handed Jalen Brunson, but with less offensive production and more defensive production. I think he's gonna have a good, not great shot. And I think that his overall athleticism, his burst finishing around the basket is going to definitely be hindered in the NBA. I don't think it's going to be nearly as good as it was in college. And when you watch the college film on Jared Butler, that you come out with doubts about that. So I think it's going to be a little worse in the NBA. And again, as it was a question in college. And I think he only goes right. I mean, I've never seen Jared Butler finish with his left hand. Taking a look at the second round picks that the Thunder have, we're just going to briefly go over these guys since we already spent a lot of time going over their first round picks. At pick 34, I have them taking a look at either Neemias Queta or BJ Boston. Queta was a solid two-way big in college. I think his presence was definitely felt with how big he was in college. I think he's going to struggle in the NBA just with how quick he is, with the speed, with his lack of quickness, which really stood out to me. Outside of being a role man in the NBA, I don't see his role being much of anything else. He did have playmaking upside out of the post, which he's not going to get those opportunities in the NBA. But definitely playmaking out of the short roll, there's upside there. But really just being a two-way big man. BJ Boston was supposed to be a lottery pick. That 6'7" wing. We all compared him to Brandon Ingram coming out of Sierra Canyon. His freshman year was horrible at Kentucky. Shooting both sides of the ball were just horrible. But the potential is still there for that 6'7" shot creator and playmaker. I think he showed flashes, but nearly not enough. He was not consistent at all. Could be a project pick for the Thunder. I think he would definitely be right around the early second round. So if they're able to swoop him up, be a reclamation project, probably would be in their G League to start off, which would definitely help him starting off in the G League for the Thunder, and moving up to the roster depending on if they're tanking or whatnot in the later half of the season. At 36, I have them taking a look at Jason Preston, who I'm really impressed with. I think is definitely a first-round pick. I don't get how I'm not sure how the consensus is a player like Sharife Cooper being a potentially a lottery prospect, while Jason Preston, most people have him in middle of the second round. I think his shot creation from inside the paint and beyond the arc is great. His ability to read pick and rolls, he's great with no-look passes. I mean, in transition, he's a blur. Just offensively, a really fun player at that 6'4" frame. He is 21, but I think he still has room to grow, and I think he's going to continue to grow. Definitely has the potential to be the steal of the draft. I'm a huge Jason Preston fan. If the Thunder are able to pick him up at 36, and maybe with those, with that 16th and 18th pick up a two of those wings that I previously mentioned, and get Jason Preston in the second round, I think that's great value. He would add, shot creation to this Thunder team, which they don't have out of that true point guard spot. Cachet is really a combo guard, which I think he would be a great pick there. Jeremiah Robinson Earl, who I have them also taking a look at, was a big man for Villanova. Some two-way upside, as a finisher, some defensive versatility, and some perimeter potential, both as a playmaker and as a shooter. I think it would be a pretty valuable pick here at 36. Although I think his true value is probably a little, maybe into the the 40s range, but at 36 in the second round, like who's really counting? And then with their last pick, the 55th pick in the draft, Isaiah Todd and Charles Bassey. Isaiah Todd just finished up his season in the G League. I think he flashes stretch big potential. I think he has athleticism, but just his lack of production, I think he's going to struggle defensively in the NBA with his IQ. Just wasn't really there defensively in the G League, and as I previously mentioned, I think he's going to struggle in the NBA on that side of the floor. But overall, I think Isaiah Todd's true value is as a floor spacing big. I'm not sure how he doesn't really have much to offer outside of that and his athleticism. And then Charles Bassey, a two-way big who I think might go undrafted, which is pretty surprising, out of Western Kentucky. I think instead of just doing what he's good at, which is just being a two-way force, I think he was trying to force jump shots a lot, which I think will highlight, which will negatively affect scouts' opinion on him. I think he's probably much higher than the 55th pick, but just taking a look at what scouts will think and where he's likely to end up, I have him here at 55. Even though it's hard, because I could definitely see Charles Bassey going as high as in the late first round to the Brooklyn Nets, and I can see him falling all the way to 55. It all depends on what scouts think, and I think his mindset is the biggest doubt, just because of how many jump shots he took, when just how dominant he was in college. It's like, dude, you don't need to do that. Just do what you can do, right? But again, these are the players that I have them taking a look at with all their second round picks. And finally, we're going to take a look at some potential free agents that the Thunder could sign. They're going to have a good amount of cap space, as previously mentioned, and as we took a look at their salary cap earlier, we're just going to name off some potential free agents that I think they could sign. First off, Otto Porter, right? I don't think he's going to cost as much as $28 million, coming off a season with the Orlando Magic where he was pretty on and off, right? He was traded at the deadline. I think he come in, add a little bit of veteran presence, right? Maybe he comes in, he might be a little bit of a reclamation project. Maybe he comes in, averages 15, 16 points per game on good efficiency from behind the arc, and maybe a team trades for him and they get good value for him. I think he would fit in the roster, right? Space the floor for Shea, maybe Kemba, maybe one of their draft picks, and add a veteran presence. Kelly Olynyk, again, a big man, as previously mentioned. I think he definitely showed out. I don't think he did. He definitely did show out for the Houston Rockets in the later half of the season last year, as he was traded there from Miami in the Oladipo trade. I think, I'm not sure how much I believe in it. Maybe he just caught lightning in a bottle at the end of the season, but at the very least, he would come in and space the floor for Shea. And maybe if Sam Presti does want to continue to move all these veterans for picks, I'm sure they would give him ample usage where he could show off that floor spacing ability to the max, and they could get some solid value for him. Terrence Davis, coming off a season, with the Sacramento Kings, where he's really a floor spacer. I think that, again, Thunder could pick up another wing who can space the floor. Nemanja Bjelica and Trey Lyles would fill a similar role to Kelly Olynyk. I'm going to skip over Lowry for a second and just go to Zach Collins, where I think Zach Collins, again, he's going to be injured. Maybe the Thunder would potentially sign him to like a two-way deal, probably a 2-year deal where it probably wouldn't cost that much money, and they could bring him in as sort of like a reclamation project where the theory of Zach Collins would fit really well with Shea being, that two-way big who can space the floor. Maybe nurse him back to health. Maybe he gets back, midway, maybe towards the later end of the season, and maybe he's able to produce. And then finally taking a look at Larry Markkinen, I think the Thunder should definitely swing at him. Maybe offer him 17 mil for maybe 4 years, 17 mil. I think he's going to definitely be available. I think Chicago is definitely going to let him go depending on the price range or depending on how much money he demands. And I think he'd come and be a great fit, being that pick and pop partner next to Shea. He could play. He's obviously an awful defender, as we all know, given his time in Chicago. But if he's paired with a solid defensive five, which I think the Thunder still have some work to do to look at. But I think Larry Markkinen could potentially be a good fit. I previously mentioned Serge. I was debating putting Serge Ibaka on this list. Just being, again, that two-way big man for them, because coming off the season that he just had with how disappointing he was with injuries, maybe the Clippers don't re-sign him, and if he doesn't re-sign with the Clippers, I think it might be wise for the Thunder to throw maybe 7-8 mil, outbid him compared to other teams, and he could come in, rest up, prove that he's healthy, and prove that he's that two-way impact player that he was for Toronto. Obviously not as good given all the injuries, but still a productive player. And some team might be willing to give up assets for Serge Ibaka, maybe a title contending team. Or they could just hold on to him and he could be a great fit next to Shea. That's the end of the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe and share with a friend if you enjoy the content. Have a good day and see you guys later. Peace.